Come in, if you dare. Welcome to a world of the fantastic and the macabre. Welcome to Ghost Stories YYC. Prepare yourself for a tale of terror. Written by John Ross. With art by John Ross.
Into the Mithraeum. The way out of the darkest place is often not to seek the light, but rather to brave further into the deep. I come to the historic seaport of Trieste on the Adriatic coast in late August. The Italian sun is hot at this time of year. The heat hangs in the air like an invisible fog blanketing everything. The sea, the land, the cobbled streets, and the terracotta-colored roofs. I take the morning on a small waterside cafe terrace to enjoy one of the best cups of coffee I have ever had. The way the light plays on the water of the Gulf entrances me. Details become startlingly clear in the brightness of day and the quiet focus of being in a new place. I travel north out of the city in the early afternoon. I am heading up the Gulf toward Duino, where I will meet Adriana the following day. The thought of seeing her again rests with a noticeable weight in my chest, fluttering now and again like a small bird trapped in the cage of my ribs. The train follows the coastline intimately, like a single brushstroke of gray, between the cobalt blue of the Adriatic and the terra verte of the hills that rise steeply east to the hinterlands of the karst plateau. It flirts with the sea, so closely at times it threatens to give in and tumble into her blue embrace. I gaze out of the window at the hillsides of dolomite and scattered black pine forests and cannot help but think of the remarkably long history here. 2,000 years ago, the legionaries of Julius Caesar marched these shores north with the promise of victory over the Gallic tribes of modern-day France, and passed under the watchful, stoic gaze of these very trees. This is a land long walked by warriors, and in its many recesses are their tombs. The train stops at Monfalcone, where a bus takes me into the center of Duino. I step down onto pavement that radiates heat past my ankles, wave off some enterprising taxi drivers, and make the short walk to the hotel. It is a simple gray building with 2 pink hydrangeas in full bloom in the front garden. A gull circles overhead, announcing its enthusiasm. I step inside and take the place in. The room smells of apples and freshly baked pastries. 3 white tables are neatly arranged along a navy blue bench against the front window. Waiting for me on the bench by the window is Adriana. She glances up at me from a book. Her long black hair is pulled up and back from her high forehead, her cheekbones pronounced by the pursing of lips into a calculated intensity. Her dark blue eyes focus on my chest as if she is deeply lost in thought, or perhaps she sees through to the caged memory of herself hidden beneath my ribs. Her eyes lift to meet mine. Her body softens and her face warms. Adriana rises from her seat and embraces me tightly, holds me at arm's length, then embraces me again. My heart sinks a little, capsized by the weight of what I still feel for her. Over lunch we discuss our plans for the following days. I have come here to help Adriana fulfill a dream she has long had, to stand by the banks of the river Timivo, where it runs 1,000 feet below the earth. We will descend into the depths of the Slovenian karst through an abyss near the big collapsed Doline, a massive sinkhole near the town of Skokjan on the Slovenian border where the river Timivo carves into the earth, then plunges in a breathtaking display 500 feet into the underworld. The Timivo is one of antiquity's most famous rivers. In myth it brings from legend to life the Acheron, the Cocytus, the Phlegethon, the Lethe, and the river Styx, converging below the mantle of the world on a relentless path toward Hades. In reality, it flows from its headwaters in the Julian Alps, dives underground at Skokjan, and emerges 30 kilometers west at Duino, where it drains into the Adriatic Sea. Ours is a technical and dangerous descent. Despite my caving experience and the many climbs we have done together, I am apprehensive. Adriana is a skilled climber, but she has spent very little time in caves, so our plan must be thorough. I have something to show you, Adriana says to me. Come. We take her car north into the country where the hamlet of San Giovanni sits quietly at the foot of the karst. Where are we going? I ask as we navigate a narrow footpath from the main road through a thicket of cedars and yucca plants. There's an old 15th century church here, she says. It is a popular stop for tourists, but it has a bit of a dark secret. The church sits on a pad of cut grass facing southwest, directly overlooking the place where the Timavo re-emerges from below ground to meander out to the Gulf. We enter through a small door at the nave. Look, Abriana says. She points to a roped-off area in the apse of the church where foundations of a much older building contain a spring of water bubbling up through the floor. I am struck by how much this church seems to be a place to worship the river itself. The Timavo rises up right into the altar. And here, she gestures to a small iron grate set into the floor near the south wall. I kneel and look through the grate. 20 feet below, I see a cave-like room with a pair of ancient stone pews at the foot of a carved relief depicting a man plunging a knife into the chest of a bull. What am I looking at? It is a Mithraeum, she answers. A cave temple devoted to the god Mithras. He was a warrior's god, hewn from the living rock to create the cosmos and all things, the father of the world. She looks down at me with a disquieting mix of fear and adulation in her eyes. He wasn't very popular in the Pantheon, and less so with the Christians, Abriana continues, her face relaxing into a smile. Mithraism was a mysterious antagonist to early Christianity. The followers of Mithras worshipped all over the empire in secret, like a cult, anywhere Rome sent its legionaries, and always in underground places. Is it still an active religion, I ask? Abriana gestures for me to follow and turns toward the door. It is. The following day we drive east to Skokjan, where the abyss awaits. The green of the boreal woodland, dense above the karst, shimmers to yellow and back again in the early day sun. We stop above the Dole line to see the Timavo, there under the light for its last moments before beginning its dark pilgrimage. Access to the abyss is through a hatch in the floor of a small mausoleum-turned caving shed at the head of a graveyard near the edge of town. The aptness of this is not lost on us, and we laugh nervously as we check our gear. We descend through the hatch at last, and I feel grateful to be here with her, together against the dark. We downclimb into an open shaft of water-worn limestone with scattered footholds and safety points, until the shaft tightens and the bolt hangers disappear. For 20 feet or so we must chimney down the shaft using only our arms and legs applied like a wedge against the slick rock walls, the shaft black and infinite below us like the maw of a great beast. A short lateral passage, another down climb, and a narrow crawlway lead us to our first of 2 chokes on the descent. This choke is a maze of boulders that must be traveled inch by inch, with care not to disturb a single rock. We follow a string placed here years ago to mark the way. At the midpoint, the passage takes a sudden twist upward to bypass a large rock with markings burnt into it by torch. Roberto Amato Compagno della Terra. Robert, beloved companion of the earth. It is the markings of an unplanned grave, a body irretrievable from a freak collapse of the choke, left in the depths by necessity, only inches from my hand. My headlamp lingers on the text and I suppress a rising wave of fear. We push on. The choke opens at a downslope with room to kneel. We gather ourselves and step down through a narrow keyhole into an enormous chamber sprawling out before us like a cosmic void. Massive shafts of white light descend through holes in the arched ceiling hundreds of feet overhead, like the fingers of a great colossus poised to grip the earth. I am consumed by wonder in this incredible place. We turn off our headlamps, and for a few minutes we are weightless amid the dim glow of distant light on living rock, both as old as time itself. Abriana breaks us from our reverie, her voice low and steady. Do you hear it? I listened closely. Nothing. And then, yes, a faint rushing sound gathering at the edges of my ears. "The river," she whispers and moves off toward the sound. Beyond the chamber we descend to the bottom of another shaft, through a gap and a final choke to a long tunnel. The sound of the river growing with every step. The tunnel falls away down a field of boulders to a beach of black sand, and we are there, standing at last on the banks of the Timavo. In front of us the mythical river of Hades twists and rages against the limestone in a cacophony like I have never heard. The beams from our lights probe the water like lanterns at sea, and we are mariners of the underworld. I look at Abriana, expecting to see her face, smiling in the fulfillment of her dream, but she is not beside me. She is moving toward the end of the cavern where the river disappears down a steep passage. She steps confidently over sand and rock. I follow. She says something in a raised voice, but I can't make it out over the rush of the river. Urgency takes me when I lose sight of her lamp and the darkness gathers to reclaim the place where she was. I move as quickly as I can, step for step, where she has left her trail in the black sand to the passage and down. I emerge at a plunge pool where the river crashes loudly, right around a corner and into a high-ceilinged hall. Before me, in the dim light of my lamp, through the drifting swirls of fine black dust, emerge towering pillars carved from the living rock. In long rows, 20 deep or more, they stretch into the vast dark of the cavern. At the foot of the pillars are stone benches that line the walls, their tops thick with silt and scattered with the detritus of an ancient feast. Between them, great iron braziers hulk in the darkness, cold and unlit for 1,000 years. This is a pious place, sublime and terrible. I stumble forward against the dark, against the dread that swells within me. Above the roaring of the river, heavy, stunted exhalations permeate the blackness. Warm, acrid air fills my nose and mouth. I think my senses deceive me. I raise my head to stretch my lamplight further. An expectant fear rides upon every thread of the retreating dark. Before me, in defiance of reason, stands a great black bull. Its massive head lifts into the light. It drags a cloven hoof along the limestone and flares its nostrils, breath scattering the black dust that hangs in the air. A heavy tether around its neck binds it in place. Beside the bull, in covenant with this impossible vision, is Abriana. Her caving gear is strewn about her on the rocks of the dark altar, her eyes wide and wild. Struck by terror, I want to ask her what is happening to us, but I cannot speak. I can only listen. In ritual she cries out, her voice muffled by the river's roar, "Mithras, unbound from the light of the cosmos." And she plunges a sharp stone into the chest of the bull. The animal collapses slowly and sorrowfully to the cold stone. I am paralyzed in disbelief, witness now to an absurd and terrifying theater. Abriana descends from the altar past the last great pillar, down black sand to the river again. It is her dream to stand at the banks of the Timavo, where it runs 1,000 feet below the earth. At the river's edge she steps aboard a wooden raft. Another figure looms there, crouched in the darkness. Abriana's face is fixed on mine, her dark blue eyes still wide and furious. The figure pushes a long pole against the bank, and the raft and Abriana drift past the edges of my scattering light and are gone.